Now, recently I did a video on Krystal and fuck me, I can never remember this guy's name, Cigar. And I feel like I was a little bit uncharitable in that video. I'm sincere. I'm being sincere about that. Is it Sagar? Sagar? Sauger? Is it Sauger? We'll try Sauger, okay? I do feel I was a little bit uncharitable in that video. And essentially my criticisms were that the show The Rising, or Rising, between Sauger and Krystal is basically a cheap, thinly veiled effort to direct jaded, burnt-out Bernie Sanders supporters towards being more sympathetic to the far right than they are to the left, because at least the far right gets populism done. And I still stand by that belief. I was just maybe a little bit hyperbolic in expressing it, but toning down the hyperbole might help me make a better point. I was not the only person to make that point, by the way, because pretty much the same day that I did my criticisms, an article was released. Isn't right-wing populism just fascism? From a Mr. Nathan J. Robinson. Now, I took a look over this, and it's a pretty excellent article in my humble opinion. And what it does essentially is it challenges the narrative of Rising. The narrative of Rising is this. Essentially, there are many axes along which you can divide people politically. You can, left-leaning socially, right-leaning socially, authoritarian, libertarian, but there's also institutionalist and populist. And the argument of Rising is that there is a shared interest between people on the right who are populist and people on the left who are populist. Now, my argument is that that's fucking bullshit. As a left-leaning populist, I do not have anything in common with right-leaning populists. Now, I do share some criticisms with right-leaning populists, and I've noticed this because I talk with right-leaning populists all the time. They're fascists. Often they'll be very critical of corporations. They'll be very critical of state corruption. You know who was also critical of both of those things? You've heard him before. You've heard him, the man, the myth, the legend. That's right, it's Adolf Hitler. See, the point is, criticisms of corporations does not necessarily mean that different groups of people are going to come to the same solutions for those problems. Now, here's a conversation I could conceivably have with a neo-Nazi. I could walk up to that neo-Nazi, and I could say, hey there, don't you think that international corporations have way too much influence when it comes to dictating our national policy? And they would say, yeah, I agree with that. And then I would say, don't you think we should curtail the influence of these international corporations and maybe levy more government, regulations on them, cut back on the extent to which they influence, like, our financial and immigration policy? And they would go, yeah, we should totally do that. And then I would say, great, we have a lot in common politically. So how about we raise taxes, we push higher degrees of diversity initiatives, we ban lobbying, and we work towards integrating our corporate structure into a broader plurality of equality-based, anti-classist society. And the fascists would say, well, whoa, hold on. I just want to gas the Jews. Well, whoa. Government policy to increase egalitarian measures. No. I just want to build the camps, So the issue is, and this is what I see from Tucker Carlson all the fucking time. Have you ever seen a Tucker Carlson bit? Please tell me some of you have, okay? Please tell me, okay? They're all the same. It always gets clipped, and sometimes gullible lefties will see those clips, and they'll think, oh, wow, even he's saying it. Tucker Carlson will go on and talk about how corporations have gone too far and Wall Street is raping our country. And sometimes lefties will look at that and they'll go like, wow, even a Fox News host gets it. Well, no. Tucker Carlson is pretty much a white nationalist, and he's also under the thumb of the billionaire class. He openly admits it. His populism is fake. But that's the thing. the populism of the Third Reich was also pretty fake. It's really difficult to advocate for populism and authoritarianism at the same time. Now, the popular will to do something about the governmental structure, to implement an authoritarian, one-party state, that can exist, but is that really a populist government? I would argue not really. And it's why it's very easy for people like Tucker Carlson, who are bitches to the billionaires, to capitalize on that energy. As this person right here in chat says, this is the very reason why the Nazis called themselves National Socialists. The Nazis hated socialists. We died first. The very first, we were right up there in the beginning. The socialists in Germany, we got the bullet first. We were the greatest threat to them, and always had been. First they came for the socialists, you know how it goes. But they called themselves socialists, and they adopted socialist rhetoric when it came to criticizing classism in the Weimar Republic. It just goes to show, as always, fascism is what's the term? Asyncretic? What's the term? When it's incoherent. You can pull fascist arguments from many different points. Fascism is, parasitic, perhaps, is idiosyncratic. Thank you. It's idiosyncratic. It can pull inspiration and power from many sources because it doesn't have to be consistent. It doesn't have to be anything except powerful. So I reject the idea that there is any unity to be found between the left and the right when it comes to populism, and that is essentially the argument being made by one Mr. Nathan Robertson in this here wonderful article. I encourage all you to take a look at it. It's not especially long. Look at this super fancy little bookend that they've got right here. Look at that. Don't you want to take a look? Don't you want to take a peep? I know you do. I know you do. Link for the lazy? Fuck you. Just Google the title. Jesus. Now, this article frustrated, I imagine, Krystal Ball, because just a few days afterwards, they made this video, a response to our critics. I've skimmed through this video, but I have not seen its entirety. My goal when watching this is going to be pointing out any bad arguments or any instances where I feel these people are acting in bad faith. That is my goal. So I'll do my best. I'm going to try to be nice and calm otherwise. Nathan replied to this video. Yes, Nathan has made a video, or made an article responding to this article, as the cycle goes. And so we go.
What's on your radar?
Well, friends, Nathan Robinson of Current Affairs has come for us. A full 3 months after our book came out, he decided to write a review, arguing that Saagar and his views are beyond the pale, and I am complicit in enabling him. Now, honestly,
just to clarify, Saagar, the co-host who works with Krystal Ball, is a fascist. Constantly signal boosts. Tucker Carlson makes all the far-right populist arguments you could want. He really is a reprehensible piece of shit. They're, like, 100%. That's the thing. Rising is supposed to be this bantying liberal back and forth. Saagar and Krystal Ball are supposed to be like, here's the right wing, here's the left wing, look at them argue. The issue is that by participating in this discourse of equivalency, you're doing the classic liberal mistake of giving equal time and credence to ideas which are not equally worthwhile. Krystal Ball, by being complicit in this, normalizes the idea that far-right populism is just another axis along which lefties can occasionally find camaraderie, and that we should be willing to work with them in certain instances. In essence, it normalizes them. It makes them seem less harmful than they are.
I always wonder how to respond to these things. Do you just ignore it? Do you send out a snippy tweet, which I did, and move on?
Okay.
But I'm sure Nathan's critique is frankly one that is shared by others, so I do think that it is worth addressing. Now, technically, he frames this as a book review, but it obviously also applies to Rising, since the book is primarily a compilation of our 2020 Dem primary commentaries.
This is true.
So here is the crux of the argument that Nathan makes here. He starts by listing all kinds of terrible people who he lumps all into the category of right-wing populism. Bolsonaro, Orban, Trump, and then the obligatory Hitler and Mussolini. Thus, having equated fake populists like Trump and outright genocidal fascists like Hitler with right-wing populism, he has a...
Notice right off the bat, conflating fake populists like Hitler and Trump with actual right-leaning populists. Now, if that isn't some wacky language right there, the immediate implication being that there is some nebulous quality to people like Trump and Hitler and what have you, which is, with regards to their populism, not shared by the people who get simped on by this program, like Tucker Carlson. Oh yeah, Tucker Carlson, the real populist, who has openly admitted that he just does whatever the billionaires tell him to do.
The groundwork all laid to come to this ultimate conclusion that the left should have absolutely nothing to do with anyone who calls themselves a right populist, as of course Sagar does. So here's the conclusion.
That is not what the article says. As the follow-up article's title indicates, the argument is essentially that there is a difference between engaging with them and platforming their ideas. I know this. I'm a YouTuber. I understand this. This is part of my job. It's the reason why I don't debate or go over small reactionary channels like 5,000, 10,000, because even if I'm criticizing them, I might inadvertently get them more attention than they would otherwise get, which would be, bad.
Including paragraph. The age-old labor question is, which side are you on? Carlson, Engetti, Trump, Bolsonaro, they answer that question emphatically and openly. They are not on our side. They would use the might of the state against us. Right-wing populism is simply a lie, and nobody who is on the left should have anything to do with it. First, I think it's important to clarify what the mission of the show is, since Nathan sort of seems to mischaracterize what we're...
I mean, that's true. Trump was a right-wing populist, and the moment he got in power, he turned into, well, it was obvious to anyone who could see the patterns in his behavior, but he was an authoritarian who instantly wielded the power of the state in every conceivable manner to meet his political ends, many of which did not benefit the people who voted for him.
We're doing here in the first place. We're not pretending that we agree on everything and joining hands and singing Kumbaya. If you've been watching this show, especially in recent weeks, you know Sagar and I have deep, profound, and sometimes tense disagreements on the path forward in this country. I bet you've been having some of those ugly disagreements with your own friends and own family. So if the question is, hey, should leftists just wholesale accept right-wing populism as an ideology? Of course the answer is no, but then literally no one is arguing that.
If you watched my previous video on Krystal, she waited and listened as minutes went on while her co-host, Sagar, went on a basically neo-Nazi conspiracy rant on Joe Rogan about how the Frankfurt School disseminated far-left crazy pro-social justice ideology that indoctrinated like the future CEOs of Goldman Sachs, who then went on to control the country with their mind warped. Like, he literally did a far-right conspiracy theory, and she just sat there and agreed with him. The idea that she pushes back sufficiently on the shit that he says and does is just not true. And even if she did push back on a lot of what he said, the argument here isn't that she doesn't push back. The argument is that the way in which she engages with these ideas normalizes the idea that we should be, in some senses, working with these people.
Instead, the project of the show is pretty simple. There are two major ideologies.
Even if you don't share my agreements, I hope the people watching right now, this stream, can recognize that the way Krystal is approaching this criticism is already pretty dishonest.
Ideologies rising in America right now. What are they? What's fueling them? Where are the intersections and where are the disagreements? Frankly, during the Democratic primary, those intersections were more on display. There was a shared view of media treatment of anti-establishment candidates and of the supporters that were backing them, of the core rot in America, which has fed populist discontent, of the way that corporate interests stand in the way of pro-worker economic policies like Medicare for All. There was also a close alignment in the coronavirus economic response as both parties completely fell on their face, propping up corporations while leaving small businesses and the working class to wither on the vine.
Notice this. This language, Jesus, this language implicitly normalizes this. No, look at the framework. Look at the framework through which this discussion is taking place. well, actually, if you look back at the 2020 election, it was populism versus anti-populism. What about the social lens through which this was being viewed? Or, moreover, what about the fact that all the right populists wanted to curtail immigration? She isn't mentioning that, which is a little interesting to me. The far-right populists didn't want to challenge the working class. The far-right populists wanted to didn't want to challenge the ruling class. The far-right populists wanted to work with the economic ruling class to change certain demographic conditions in this country. Do you not see the difference between a Bernie Sanders who challenges the idea of capital and a Donald Trump who lauds and worships big business, but says that we need to cut down on immigration, which is being pushed by business? Do you recognize the difference between these two frameworks? In one of them, the challenge to corporate power is sincere and for its own sake, in the aims of equality. In the other, it's being cynically invoked to better to better an aim of curtailing immigration. Do you see the difference here? How much of Donald Trump's populist rhetoric was based on immigration? How much? Like, seriously, how much of it was immigration based? How much of Donald Trump and his economic rhetoric had to do with challenging big business? Can you find me some? Like, meaningfully challenging big business. It was like nothing. He just rambled about wanting to improve trade deals and curtail immigration. That's it. These are not comparable, but she is insisting they are. Yeah, he pledged to roll back regulations. That's true.
But in recent weeks, the differences have very much been on display. You know, we profoundly disagree on the nature of the protests, on structural racism, on policing, on the use of force by law enforcement, and maybe most of all, on deploying the military to quell protests.
Again, the criticism wasn't whether or not you disagreed, it was whether or not you pushed the idea that you have something in common to fight for.
I won't lie, it has been extremely uncomfortable. It's easy to argue about these things in carefully composed tweets sent into an audience of your ideological brethren.
Imagine carefully composing a tweet.
It's harder to engage with them in real time, face to face, without the benefit of a straw man. I've grappled these past weeks myself with the tenability of exactly what we're attempting to do. After all, there is a reason why no one else is doing it. It's not easy.
No, the reason why is because there's only one slot for The Rising that's being managed by a Republican producer for a company that is owned by a friend of Trump. It's not because you were the only person brave enough. It's because you were the only person willing to be complicit in this particular scheme. Not calling you a grifter here, but...
But ultimately, once I calm down, I just fundamentally don't believe the left benefits from isolation, deplatforming, and a refusal to engage.
Nobody was criticizing you for not engaging. We're criticizing you for enabling.
In fact, on this show, I've seen quite the opposite. Let's take as an example probably the most fraught issue over the past few weeks, which has been Trump's threat to invoke the Insurrection Act. Now, I do believe such a deployment of the active duty military against protesters would be a terrifying move towards authoritarianism and, yes, towards fascism. I made that case explicitly on the show, and we debated it here fiercely. I wish that was a view that was outside of mainstream acceptability, beyond the pale, so to speak. But we have to acknowledge that it's not. When the president is advocating for military...
This has literally nothing to do. Again, the specific criticism is the idea that economic populism is a unifying cause amongst which the right and the left can organize and agree on. That is it. That is the criticism. So her repeated deference to, look, I pointed out that fascism is bad and even argued that it's bad, is very irrelevant to the subject at hand. Now, I don't think Krystal Ball is stupid. I know she's familiar with the criticisms that are being made of her. The fact that she keeps deferring to these weak responses suggests to me she's not interested in actually addressing the point.
Deployment and a sizable chunk of the population...
Yeah, that's true. Richard Spencer is for Medicare for All. That is true.
...is in support of it.
For white people.
I believe engagement is more effective than burying your head in the sand. That's different from saying that every
Nobody's arguing for you to bury your head in the sand.
crank or fringe view deserves a hearing, and it can be hard to know where to draw that line. But in general, when a view is held by powerful leaders and a large portion of the country, I believe direct engagement is a more effective strategy than shunning.
Keep in mind, it's possible to directly engage with bad ideas without having a co-host who is basically an open fascist who gets 50% of the airtime and who you very often defer to with regards to certain ideas and talk about the necessity of collaborating with. It is actually, this may sound unbelievable, my channel is about engaging with ideas that I find odious, but believe it or not, I don't dedicate 50% of my channel time to having on people with those views and then agree with them from time to time. These aren't the criticisms that are being addressed.
We've seen the proof of that here. Because we actually have to deal with each other as human beings and can't just caricature and strawman the other side as uniquely evil, we've both heard from quite a number of viewers about being de-radicalized. Viewers who have now placed their anger at the structures, leaders, and institutions which have screwed over ordinary Americans rather than at their fellow Americans themselves.
Yeah, that's the problem. If all you're deferring to is economic populism, you don't know what their solutions are. Just agreeing that there are institutional problems is not enough. This is the criticism. You can't just say, oh, well, now they know there are problems with the system. Fascists think there are problems with the system. Trump ran on arguing there are problems with the system. Adolf Hitler ran arguing there are problems with the system. The solutions are what we have to agree on, not the problems. What am I supposed to do? Link arms with every neo-Nazi who agrees that transnational corporations need to be curtailed? What do we do when we get at actually fixing that problem? At what point what do we do then? Then do we split? Well, that's step one. You need to agree on how to fix the problem at step one, not at step 8. There's not a road to get to and then you talk about the solution. Figuring out the solution, or at least the general direction to go in, is the first step once you have identified the problem. We are there. And that's why you spend so much of your time making nebulous arguments about how far-right populists also agree there's something wrong with the system, but spend very little time fundamentally addressing what their propositions would be.
Viewers who've been able to have conversations with family members again about politics. If your political project involves uniting a multiracial working class coalition around social democracy, that is incredibly important and very heartening to hear.
Well, let's hear that again.
Around social democracy, that is uniting a multiracial working class coalition around social democracy, that is incredibly
multiracial working class coalition around social democracy. Why don't you ask your co-host how he feels about social democracy? How about multiracial? See, that's the issue. I agree. Multiracial working class solidarity around social democracy sounds like a great path towards socialism. But far-right populists don't agree. They disagree. They want to suppress racial dissidents because they believe acknowledging the problem is tantamount to challenging white people. And then they don't want social democracy. They just want civic nationalism, where you curtail immigration and stratify the economic inequality.
Important and very heartening to hear. By the way, I also think we should be pretty humble about the virtue of our own side versus the other side. It's not clear to me why Sagar should be beyond the pale, but the corporate and imperialist
Oh, he's here?
Democrats who sold out the country and murdered civilians overseas should be just fine.
Listen to this piece of shit. Oh yeah, people say fascists are bad, but what about corporate Democrats? This is her job. Her job is to take people on the left and draw them into this political neutral or right-leaning populism where they sneer at the Democratic Party harder than they do. What is it the South Park creators said? That the libertarians, they were like, I hate the Republicans, but I really hate the Democrats. Listen, I'm all for criticizing Democrats, but do you know what? If people like Sagar were in charge, they would be worse. The only reason the Democrats have done more bad shit than Sagar is because the Democrats field presidents and Sauger is one dude. But if we were to stratify Sauger's positions into a broader political party and put them in charge of the country, they would be monsters. So this equivalency is, well, at best it's disingenuous, and at worst it is actively playing cover for the far right.
Finally, Nathan readily admits that he agrees with 80% of what Sauger says. Many of the leftists who watch the show probably feel the same way.
Because you talk about problems and ignore the conversations on solutions. That's the issue. That's the issue.
Now, that is partly because we do tend to gravitate towards topics where we have some level of shared interest and agreement, but it's also partly because there are a number of things on which we do in fact agree. So one of the central questions of this show is on those areas of overlap, can the new left and the new right work together?
The new left and the new right. This language. What is the new right? I've heard the term new right before, and it's been used by fascists. That's what they say when they say new right. What does that mean?
Should they? And that is in fact the question that I put to Nathan and others who view the world as he does. If you have a Republican who's willing to work with you on a living wage, but they're an immigration restrictionist, do you work with that person? If you've got a Trumpist who will stand
on the living wage, but only on the living wage, only that. You can say, I will work with you on the living wage because we agree on the living wage, but you will not then go out and say, see, look at how much we have in common with these people. Wow, look at that. Whoa, wow. Actually, the far right isn't so bad, guys. We have so much in common. We should focus on our agreements. Don't vote for them, but if you can, work with them on narrow wedge issues that you can work together on. That's it.
And with you on union rights, but calls coronavirus the Wuhan virus, do you still collaborate? If they will help you fight,
you can work with them on specific issues without broadly announcing that, hey guys, we should work with them, and hey, aren't the corporate Democrats so bad? And actually the real problems in this country are more about economic populism, and we have so much in common. I'm trying to be charitable here. I'm responding to the stuff she's saying. Do you all recognize how dishonest this is? Do you recognize how the ball she's playing right now, like this is a dangerous path to take? This isn't just me, right? I'm not trying to hyperbolize all of her statements, but I feel like
for a UBI during a pandemic, but they support using the Insurrection Act, what do you do? Now, my answer is the same as Bernie's. When he worked with Ron Paul on surveillance, or worked with John McCain to support veterans, or worked with Mike Lee to end our backing of the war in Yemen.
But Bernie Sanders didn't then go out and say, actually, we have so much in common with the right, let me co-host a show with them and signal boost their opinions. God damn it, dude.
I think you take yes for an answer when it's given and retort hell no when you don't agree. I think rather than retreating to your ideological corner of imagined moral purity.
See, she's calling Nathan Robinson a woke scold. Nathan Robinson said, hey, maybe don't work with fascists. And she's saying that he's being a woke scold for that. That's what she just said. Retreat to your corner of imagined moral purity.
You engage with the world as it exists in all of its messy ugliness, because
what does this mean?
That's reality.
That's just reality, hun. You just have to signal boost fascists and say they're okay and not as bad as the Democratic Party. This isn't how it works. Look at how slimy she is. Look at her deference. Look at her hands up in the air. Oh, that's just how the world works, babe. This is just how it is. No willingness to take responsibility for her behavior or to defend the specific ways in which she engages in advocacy. So the difference is you can work with them but not endorse them. Am I getting that right? Yes! Work with them on the specific issues. If Rand Paul is anti-surveillance, I can say, I agree with Rand Paul on anti-surveillance, but I will not say, hey, people like Rand Paul actually have a lot in common with us, and don't you actually think the Democratic Party is pretty bad? No. Now let me bring a Rand Paul supporter on my program so we can talk and signal boost their opinions. They wrote a book together, yeah. This is hardly an unwilling relationship.
Now, I'm not claiming I navigate these things perfectly. Of course I don't. I always want to do better and try to live up to the trust that you all have placed in us. But for those who believe that the core project of this show is rotten from the jump, not only do I disagree.
Yeah, 100%. You can engage with these ideas and selectively work with opposition like members who share some values without doing the stuff you're doing.
But I believe that way of thinking does profound damage to making actual progress on a social democratic agenda for the multiracial working class. Because the moment that you caricature everyone who calls themselves populist right as Hitler, no one's going to listen to another word you have to say.
Look, this is literally a Sargon
nor should
argument.
they. And Sagar, look, Nathan.
This is literally a Sargon argument. As soon as you just call everyone a Hitler, nobody should listen to you. Which, of course, the article writer, Nathan Robinson, did not do at any point. He was merely listing right-leaning populists. Look at his face. He's so happy to have defense played for him.
Wrote this piece, right? And I was like, what do we do with it?
I mean, she does just sound like a conservative pundit.
Like, do I say? Do I just let it go?
Well,
what do we do?
It's free publicity for him.
But I do. This is a critique we've heard before.
Sure.
And so I think it's worth laying out, like, what is it we're doing here? What is this all about? There's all these like conspiracy theories about how we're some like stalking horse for some other thing. It's really quite simple. Like, you're not saying you love everything I say. I'm not saying I love everything you say. But there are these two new coalitions rising in America. You can either deal with that or you can try to ignore it and isolate yourself increasingly.
See, the way she makes this argument, by working with them, you're acknowledging the existence of far-right populists, and by not working with them, you're ignoring them. She's framing it as the only way to disagree with her is to ignore reality. Everything she says is oozing dishonesty. She is dripping with bad faith. I do believe she's a grifter, but it's very difficult to prove that. I do believe, though, and I can say this with great confidence, that she is lying here. She is smart enough to know what she is doing. This is not some accidental, bad, like poorly phrased defense of her behavior. She is an intelligent and professional, media-trained pundit. She knows exactly what she is doing. And what she is doing right now, and the message that people are supposed to take from this, essentially, is that if you disagree with what Krystal is doing, if you don't want to work together to form a populist union with the far right, then you are infantile, a woke scold, and you are ignoring reality.
Into these ideological corners, and I just think that is fundamentally the wrong approach.
Well, it's foolish. Tucker Carlson's show is the #1 show in America right now, beating Sean Hannity by hundreds of thousands of viewers. And there's a reason for that, which is that obviously he struck a nerve with a huge segment of the American right who are hearing an anti-corporate agenda, probably for the very first time in a very long time.
So what are the solutions? You work together on the solutions. When you listed Bernie Sanders' willingness to work with Republicans before, you worked on the solutions. Bernie Sanders didn't say, oh, well, okay, you agree that healthcare is a problem, Mr. Donald Trump. You agree. Now, you believe that healthcare is too cheap. It needs to be more expensive so more people die. And I believe we need Medicare for all. But we agree that there is a problem, so I have no choice but to form a popular two-person news show with you where we discuss things, and very occasionally I defer to you on points that I really shouldn't be agreeing with. No! They agreed on solutions.
So what does that mean? Does that mean that whenever you're somebody who also shares anti-corporate views, that you shouldn't want to engage with that person or even with the view itself whenever you have some overlap? And by the way, this is the only place where we have people, a significant right and significant left audience, who never get to hear their views challenged. If you're living in an echo chamber of...
Again, like literally, like these are all right-wing arguments. I mean, he is right-wing, so it makes sense from him, but Krystal is agreeing with what he's saying here, is passively enabling it, so...
Just leftist, then of course, that's how you create somebody who caricatures, who caricatures me or Tucker or whatever is the same as Hitler, as Mussolini, and it's all...
They didn't say you're the same, they said you're right-leaning populists. You describe yourself as a right-leaning populist. Tucker Carlson describes himself as a right-leaning populist. Adolf Hitler is by definition a right-leaning populist. Nobody disagrees on this. That was the comparison that was being drawn.
Also, as you said, I hear from people on the right, hard right folks all the time who watch this show, who said, you know what? I had to consider that they don't all just want to kill us, and that instead what it really is that the structures, that the way that we're all divided is really what my enemy is, really my enemy, and that's the focus that I want to focus on.
That's not enough. Nazis also believe that. Nazis believe this is literally the Jewish question. The Jewish question is that they, the tribe, had infiltrated politics and academia to disseminate cultural elements that encourages people to divide themselves based on race and gender, disseminating pro-black, pro-Hispanic, pro-woman, pro-trans propaganda that encourages people to rise up and express their identities in ways that are detrimental to the white race. That is a systemic issue. A Nazi would agree with what you just said. The solution is the critical junction along which we should form coalitions.
So is that not a benefit to you
No!
and to many people on the left? If they're willing to hear those people out, I think it is.
Yeah.
I think
No, I would rather conservatives live in their hyper-individualist fucking neo-libertarian dipshit land where the most they do is take away welfare than conservatives getting together and thinking, well, wait a second, hold on. What if it's actually the transnational corporations that are the issue? And working together as a populist union to form a fucking ethno-state. I would rather conservatives live in their neoliberal bubble than I would them actually moving towards fascism.
it's the same way on the left. And again, what did we cover here during the coronavirus pandemic?
I can't do this.
If Josh Hawley and Pramila Jayapal both want to cover Americans' payroll during the coronavirus crisis, who cares what letter is next to their name?
Right.
Pramila Jayapal is an immigration extremist, in my view. Do you see me caring whenever she's talking about covering people's payrolls? No, I don't care at all. And I don't think the American working class, who could dramatically benefit right now from receiving their wage payroll subsidy by the federal government, gives a damn what you think about any of these social issues, because they're struggling and they just want to eat right now.
Then why do Republicans who are starving and don't have health care keep voting for Republicans who keep them starving and without health care? What issues lead people to vote for Republicans when, if you are poor, you have every reason to vote for a Democrat? Why? If it's all about class interest, what other conceivable social issues could lead people to vote against their class interest? Do you think there might be a racial bias? Maybe that might be part of it. Maybe a gender thing? Immigration? I mean, Donald Trump literally won off immigration rhetoric.
Yeah.
That's actually what I care about.
And I think your point is really important about, like, and look, I don't want to oversell what we're doing here, although I do think, I am very proud of this show and really proud of the audience we have and its ideological diversity, which has only become more and more diverse over time. I mean, we literally hear from people from all across the spectrum who watch this show.
I hear this. I've heard this shit from fucking Sargon, dude. Oh, well, you say, I'm not going to try and do the accent, not after the Good Bernie one. You say I'm a far right person, but actually I know there are women and black people who like my stuff. This isn't an argument.
Where else can you go that, like, someone on the left, like myself, could level a criticism at Trump that anyone would even pay attention to? Or that someone on the right, such as yourself, like during the Democratic primary, you were saying, like, Bernie's messing this up because he's not going after Joe Biden.
Wait. On what platform can a left-leaning person criticize Trump and a right-leaning person criticize Bernie? Oh, hold on. Let me think. Hold on. Let me just think through all the media apparatuses. Right? Just let me triangulate the incredibly narrow, slim range of shows in which you could be allowed to, as a left and right person, respectively, criticize Trump and Bernie Sanders, respectively. I'm thinking, oh, right. All of them. What the fuck are you talking about?
He is not behaving like the anti-establishment candidate. He needs to be able to win. And people listen to you because you had treated him fairly and respectfully in other areas. So that is, to me, a really important part of what we're doing here, because if you're just preaching...
I wonder what Sauger's criticisms of Bernie Sanders were, considering that Bernie Sanders was, like, literally economic populism distilled into a human being, you know? I wonder what his criticisms were. Probably, was it immigration? Was it trans rights? Like, I actually do wonder. It had to be something like that.
Preaching to the choir, and you're not changing any minds. Like, you're not challenging your own side.
Sauger didn't like Bernie's immigration and drug policy. Damn! So, pro working class Sauger, the most pro working class presidential candidate in ages, Bernie Sanders, but he didn't like him because of immigrants coming in and drugs. All that economic populism Sauger pretends to care about down the drain, because there might be brown people in this country and we might treat drugs like a medical issue rather than a criminal issue. Wow. For somebody who thinks class matters so much, he sure was willing to abandon his class interest, his populist class interest, on account of some social issues. He says he lost because he stopped appealing to the white working class people by embracing identity politics. Interesting. So he believes that the correct way to do economic populism is to appeal exclusively to white people, and that attempts to appeal to non-white people, you know, I don't know. I'm an economic populist. Something tells me I wouldn't actually have that much in line with Sauger when it comes to solutions. He wants to keep weed illegal? What do I have in common with Sauger? I wonder.
You're not changing any minds. What are you really ultimately accomplishing? And that translates into the policy level and your approach there. If you only want to just maintain your moral purity, then, you know, you're not going to get a lot accomplished. But if you're willing...
Nah, fuck it. Fuck you. Moral purity? You mean Sauger dropping the best shot this country had at real economic populism because he didn't want brown people in this country, and he thought it was somehow antithetical to his class interest to appeal to the interests of brown working class people? Nah, fuck you. This piece of shit Sauger has nothing in common with me. He is, as his daddy Tucker Carlson is, a white nationalist. Somebody who is 100% okay with social reform as long as it defers exclusively, or at least predominantly, to he is literally the son of immigrants. Oh my God, he's not white? Well, he can't possibly be a white nationalist then. In all the time of me running this channel, I have never come across a non-white person who has been a white nationalist. Damn. You're right, I have been blown the fuck out on this one. It is inconceivable that wealthy people who are not white might try to buy into the hegemonic power structure of this country by trying to appeal to the interests of whiteness. There's no such thing as self-hate, folks. Nah. Fuck this guy. Yeah, literally, Jesse Lee Peterson, the white nationalist. Fuck this guy. I have nothing in common with this person. And Krystal Ball, by implying that she has something in common with Sauger, indicates to me that I have nothing in common with her either. Fuck both of them. Seriously. And fuck everybody else who's trying to play to this delusion that there are people on the right whose economic populism aligns the interests of the lefts. Fuck them. Bernie Sanders threw it all on the line for economic populism, but because he included brown people in his dream of an equal country, Sauger drops him. Because for all his pantomiming about not giving a fuck about social issues and wanting to coalesce around a class identity, he will drop everything he claims to care about as long as it preserves white supremacy. Fuck him, fuck this show, fuck Krystal Ball. And you know what? I'm done with this segment. I don't think I strawmanned her a single fucking time. I don't think I did. I think this was actually a pretty fair reading of what she had to say. And I think she is a terrible person. Because I do not believe she is stupid enough to not know what she is doing.